This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
There are people out there all across the country pushing boundaries to grow the game of golf. Like champion speed golfer Lauren Cupp, who plays faster than anyone else. And Will Lowry, whose work in the golf community inspires more kids to get into the game. As a champion partner of the Masters, Bank of America supports everyone determined to find out what's possible. In golf and in life. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Bank of America N.A. member FDIC, copyright 2025, Bank of America Corporation, all rights reserved.
In this episode, we're joined by a special guest to explore how wild food is reshaping the way we think about hunting in North America. We dig into the rise of food-focused hunters, the challenges and opportunities of urban deer hunting, and how the stories we tell about game, land, and tradition can bridge the gap between hunters and non-hunters. We'll also touch on the conservation policy, the shifting values of a new generation, and what it means for the future of our wild food culture. Grab a drink and a seat. Here we go.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. We'll start off with a bit of news before I introduce our guest, and then we jump into kind of the content. Next up, we'll be chatting with Pascal Badar. We had to reschedule. I know we were supposed to have him on a couple weeks ago. He had a power outage due to a storm right at the time, well, right before we were supposed to record, so we didn't get the chance to talk with him, but we're super excited to talk with him about foraging and fermented things and all that stuff. It's going to be a great episode to kind of bring together fermentation, wild foods, and all that stuff, so super excited to chat there. As far as news from me, looking forward to turkey season. Pig camp's coming up here pretty soon. I also just got asked a week or so ago to contribute to Ducks Unlimited on their food side, so I'll be working on a recipe for their magazine this week. I think I'm going to do kind of a Vietnamese style lemongrass grilled duck noodle bowl. So not your traditional pho, but just like with the noodles and some delicious sauce and all kinds of fresh vegetables and greens with some seared duck breast I think I'm going to use, but really excited about that. Adam's not here. He had tech difficulties, so I'll share his good news. We put some of the Intrepid Eater stuff on the store, so we've got Intrepid Eater hats on the store, shirts, stickers, all that stuff. So if you're a big Intrepid Eater fan, in addition to Harvesting Nature fan, go on the website. You can order there. Click the links to our store, or you can get there from Adam's website at the Intrepid Eater. I think he also now has a Substack. I'll let him talk about that later, but it seems as though it's a note on my page, so I'll share it for him, and he can share the bigger news later. Also, too, probably our biggest news of the month, of the quarter, of the beginning of the year is The Art of Innocent Sausage Making will be out by the time you are listening to this episode. So I will say go to our store. That's the only place it's available right now. Pick it up. It's a 90-page copy of front to end of making sausage with probably like 30 sausage recipes to include a bunch in the end of things to do with sausage. So if you've ever wanted to get into sausage making, not quite comfortable with it, this is the book for you. Or if you've done a bunch of sausage making, you're looking for new recipes, this is the book for you. And we're joined by Adam. You made it.
Made it. That was ridiculous.
Well, we're live, so welcome.
Tech troubles.
Yeah, I shared your news about your merch, the Substack, and the website, but I'll let you share it because you can probably do a cooler job than I can.
Well, I started a new Substack, so I'm going to be trying out that app, and hopefully can get into some long form writing, kind of keep people abreast of what I'm up to. And I'm basically doing this to wean myself off of Facebook because I'm kind of tired of that app and I'd rather not even look or think about it anymore. So we're going to try something new, and I think it's going to be kind of fun and refreshing, and hope everyone can sign on and check that out. Also, have new Intrepid Eater hats actually in the store. I don't know if you said that yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And fresh new look on the website. It's kind of looking spazzy now, and my sister-in-law has been helping out with that, which I'm very grateful for. So give the website a look. It's looking pretty sharp now. So intrepideater.com.
I clicked on it yesterday. It looks nice.
Oh, yeah.
Looks good.
Thank
Good
you.
job. So, all right, without further ado, I'll introduce our podcast guest. So today's guest founded Project Upland, a website and media company featuring an award-winning upland films and a quarterly magazine covering everything from wild birds, public lands, shotguns, and hunting dogs. There's an S there. Is the author of the book The Urban Deer Complex, is considered one of the foremost authorities on urban deer hunting, a fierce advocate for promoting and expanding conservation policy, habitat funding, and upland game bird awareness on federal and state levels. He also works as the vice chair of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission. AJ DeRosa, welcome to the Wild Fish and Game podcast.
Thank you for having me on. Work is a strong word. A commissioner in the state of New Hampshire is a volunteer position. New Hampshire is very unique. Even our state representatives are all unpaid. So although we are a governing body with 11 commissioners, it's all volunteer.
Oh,
so
well, I mean, that's
is different than commissions of many other states, but that's kind of New Hampshire's thing. We're very fiscally conservative here in the Granite State, or the live free and die state, I guess we like to say, actually.
Awesome. Well, really excited to have you on the show. So like we kind of were chatting about earlier, it's I think we've been kind of dancing circles around each other's work for several years. Totally. And it's good to finally just sit down and kind of chat through it all.
I appreciate people that appreciate food a lot.
What's
and
us?
Anybody who's a fan of Anthony Bourdain, I am also a fan of.
Yeah.
Hence, if you've ever come across the brand Hunting Dog Confidential, was inspired by the book Kitchen Confidential.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yes.
All right,
that is where I got my inspiration. And the whole idea was this kind of like, we wanted to turn Craig Koshik into this like Anthony Bourdain of hunting dogs, really. Just these like really wild, deep cultural stories that are like the most raw and down to earth and true to where they're from, and not kind of, over corporatized or turned into something they aren't,
That's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. I see. Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig into this. I like it.
We have a podcast called Hunting Dog Confidential as well. It originally started as a print publication, which we discontinued. There's 5 volumes that exist, and it's a podcast still. And it's like, have you ever heard the podcast Hardcore History?
Yeah,
it's
one
like
of my favorites.
Like when I say it is the like, if you're into hunting dogs, like it's like injecting drugs directly into your veins. Like it is as raw as that. It's wild. And he's written 2 books, Pointing Dogs Volume 1 and Pointing Dogs Volume 2, which are essentially the Bibles of pointing dogs. And he is, I would argue, the foremost historian in the entire world on pointing dogs. Which is a pretty kind of impressive thing to claim, but there is no books that you could find that are more complete. And he's Canadian. His wife is Canadian as well, and they speak multiple languages between the two of them, and they traveled all over Europe, went to the actual towns where these hunting dogs were found, founded in the, anywhere from the 1600s to 1800s. And, I mean, they found breeds that we thought in the United States didn't exist anymore, and they found them in these little towns, and people still breeding them. He is just an incredible person, an incredibly interesting person.
That's awesome.
I'm a super fan, if you can't tell.
You've given me some good. You've given me some good listening some good listening choices here that I'm gonna fill up my week's worth of podcast listening tomorrow. So thank you.
We appreciate the downloads.
Yeah, I hear you. So I guess, can you sort of expand on your background a bit? To how'd you get into hunting? How'd you get into all of it? Like, what's your origin story, as the kids say?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up hunting. My grandfather on my father's side was the first person kind of in modern family history that was a hunter, took it up in like the 50s. And as a result, brought my father hunting. So my father hunted since he was a kid, and my father was really, really passionate about it. And in turn, introduced, me and my brother to it. So in like the 80s and 90s, I started bird hunting, and my father had Brittany's, and that's what we did. And then when I was old enough, I was allowed to go deer hunting, and it was kind of a natural progression. And so where I grew up, if people want to point to it on a map, if you've ever heard of Salem, Massachusetts, I grew up in one of the towns that surround Salem, Massachusetts, that would have been part of Old Salem. And so when I was a kid, there was a lot of grouse, almost no deer. And by the time it was the early aughts, there was deer everywhere and no grouse. It was quite the opposite kind of swing. So I went, when I was in, by the time I graduated high school and stuff, I went pretty hard off the deep end for deer hunting. And, where I grew up, North Andover, is 30 minutes outside of Boston. So you're really talking about kind of suburban, urban environments. Yeah. And it was much different than what my father and grandfather experienced, because they never would have hunted these areas because there was no deer, and then all of a sudden there's deer everywhere. And I just remember like moments of awe from both my father and grandfather when I was in like my early 20s. I called my grandfather one time actually to help me drag a deer out, and I literally couldn't get it in my truck, and the deer dressed out at 200 pounds.
Wow.
And I remember just this,
holy smokes. My
grandfather was just in complete awe over this thing, and I remember being like, this is so awesome to share this, like he loved it. But so yeah, that's how I came to be, and I was lucky enough to have it throughout my life.
Did those experiences incite you to write your first book, the urban?
Yeah.
Book?
Yeah. So I always, hunting for me, I when I first deer hunted was the Berkshires, so a really rural area. And then I was kind of just thrown to the wolves with urban deer hunting. I didn't have somebody to mentor me at first, and I was the first person in my family to take up bow hunting. So I ended up with a mentor who, incredible person, Jose, likes to be called T, lived in one of the most violent inner cities that I lived right next door to, and was probably had work experience that was not less than savory, but he's one of the best deer hunters I've ever met in my life. And he, after me begging him many times, took me under his wing, and he really started to push me in a direction to just challenge what I had known about hunting and what I thought about hunting. And so I just really adapted to this idea of thinking about how deer think. And, in suburban environments, deer are constantly having contact with humans. And so they have to distinguish between non-threatening and threatening human behavior. They don't have the luxury to just think all behavior is threatening. So when you create that situation, it actually creates really unique hunting opportunities. And I really went on the deep end for hunting big bucks. And that's how the urban deer complex came to be. And I shot 6 bucks over the course of 6 years that were in Pope and Young class, all within 30 minutes of Boston. And I put a lot of work into do it. Wow. And it was really, that book is to that point, and I know other people have picked it up and since regurgitated it in national publications and whatnot and claimed it as their own ideals. So goes the way of this industry. But it's pretty wild. Like, I have articles written 20 years ago that I wrote in Northwood's sporting journal about walking down hiking trails, intentionally wearing cologne and talking to myself so that deer wouldn't be afraid of me, and then shooting deer while I was doing that. So like we're talking about like just really radical kind of concepts. A lot of areas you can't hunt. So, but you could hike in those places. So what would I do? I could hunt across the road. I'd set my tree stand across the road, and I'd spend weeks just pounding the crap out of hiking the other side, crash through swamps, completely legal. I'm not hunting, don't have a weapon. And I just apply all this pressure. And then you go over to your tree stand 2 weeks later, all the deer hanging out there because they got so overpressured on the other side, So wow. Just these really just kind of crazy things that, and I credit my buddy Jose T. He made me into the hunter and he taught me how to learn is really what it is. And I was able to apply that to everything going forward. And I'm forever grateful for it. Best mentor ever.
Man, I think too, like I've just, sort of dipped my toe this last year into the world of urban hunting. Like I shot my deer this year. It was like 40 minutes from DC, like out on the west side of Maryland. And it's definitely not as suburban there as in some areas, but like some of the guys I've hunted with and met here locally are like, yeah, we hunt this like 6-acre park and everybody's got a designated tree stand zone, and it's only us that do it because it's a homeowners association that allows us to come in and hunt it. They're like, but it's insane the amount of deer you can kill. And I was like, it's just wild. But a lot of it too, I feel, is very creative because you mentioned sort of the rise of deer populations on the East Coast, and that sort of paired with the fact that nobody had that experience before, to like, all right, now there's this new, hunting that's available, but we've got to kind of figure it out as we go and kind of chart a path. And it seems very a way to just kind of like try different random tactics to see if they work.
Yeah, it's a weird beast. And that's it's one of the things. I still have a lot of people that reach out to me because of that book. It's out of print, so people pay some crazy prices for them on eBay. But I have a lot of people that have hit me up, continue to hit me up at least a couple times a month. One of the biggest pieces of advice is I've always given people, because I see this with hunters in general, kind of across all types of hunting, is we always do the same things over and over again. It's and like you expect it to be different, and it's like people will be like, yeah, I'm hunting this like big buck, and like I've been hunting it for years, and I know he's in here, and I just can't get him, and everything else. And it's like, okay, like you need to like push the limits. And people are like, yeah, but I don't want to like bump that deer out of there or mess it up. It's like, listen, dude, like what do you got to lose, man? You're already not killing it. like if you're gonna play hardball, buddy. Like, and you're gonna mess up. Like, it's okay. Like, that's all part of kind of the experience of doing it. And it is cool because, to your point, it's just so different. It's so different. Like, it's a frontier in a way. Mm-hmm. And that to me is really cool. With bird hunting is obviously my bread and butter these days. It's everything I do, but you're not gonna, there's no wheel to reinvent here. Hunting over a pointing dog, well, that book was solidified 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And sure, there's some clever, aggressive techniques that I certainly picked up as an urban deer hunter that can certainly bring up my efficiencies as a killer, but I'm not interested in that. Once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, you're just like, I'm not trying for a body count. I'm not trying, like, I'm enjoying it. Mm-hmm. So it's those motivations are different. So you're just not as eager to maybe apply aggressive kind of tactics to situations. But yeah, it's a different beast, but I appreciate it. Deer hunting really burnt me out in the end.
Yeah, it can do that.
Well, if you're maintaining trail cameras, tree stands, like,
yeah,
it's a lot of work. And then really, what I did was I forced myself into that expectation that I had to shoot like this, big buck every year. And that's what really ruined it for me.
Yeah.
And so I went through, and it's ironically what that was the death of the trophy phase of me. and the rise of the sportsman phase for me finally. And it happened young. I was in my late 20s when that happened. So it happened pretty young for me. And then that's what brought me back to grouse hunting, really, was this desire to do some. And I want to choose my words carefully, because I don't think that deer hunting has purpose, or I don't think people aren't enjoying it. For me, in my personal experience, grouse hunting had a lot more meaning to me. So I'm able to take more from it, and just kind of resonate with my soul a little differently. So, and that's why I'm here now. And I wish I didn't mess up deer hunting for myself like I have. And honestly, as the years go by, a little bit of me in the back of my mind's like, maybe, I got a deer rifle last year for the first time, like a legit setup, and because I've killed very few deer with a gun, and I finally got like a legit deer rifle, and I was like, yeah, this is the year. And but I didn't. I just kept grouse hunting. It's tough to leave the dog. But in New Hampshire, you can deer hunt with your dog as long as your dog does not chase the deer, which I have broken my dog from chasing deer. So point being, that's been kind of the thing. It's like, all right, like, maybe I'll go for some walks with the dog. Ironically, to the urban deer complex, you put a dog with a dog bell on, and most big bucks, even in rural New Hampshire, they don't know what's going on, and they're really curious animals. The amount of big bucks I've seen with that dog on the ground that are just sitting there looking, that, I mean, not far shots, 50-yard shots, that are 160-inch deer, 150-inch deer, and it's just like, wow, what is this deer doing? But they don't get shot at when people have dogs. It's pretty simple. It's a learned behavior. They know they're safe. So maybe this coming year I'll step up and shoot a deer for once. I've been having an itch to get back into archery. I just rewatched all the Hunger Games. I think that's why.
It'll do it. So I think one question is like, how did your sort of perspectives on wild food evolve and happen through all this? Because there's, you went through some natural transitions, as a lot of hunters do, and I think some different perspectives that you've had both with the urban hunting and then the transition into bird hunting. But was food like kind of a center point, or when did it become a focus?
Yeah, I'm a mutt ethnically, so I have a vowel in the end of my name, so I am Italian amongst that mutt. And my grandfather, the one who hunted, his father was an Italian immigrant, and his mother was an Austrian Jew. And food plays a big role in kind of that ethnicity. So I grew up, I learned how to cut up an entire deer without using a saw, so deboning an entire deer before I shot my first deer. I was young. Because food was, I can even think of being a young kid in my great-grandmother's kitchen in the inner city of Boston, and she would bake us starlings on baking sheets that she trapped on her porch. Oh, wow. So forms of wild food existed in my family forever, as far as my life view, my world view. And I always appreciated food. I love food. I didn't actually, crazy enough, I failed my way out of culinary arts school. So I went to Cambridge Culinary and quit. But I do love cooking. I just don't necessarily love structured cooking in a kitchen. God bless all of you that do it. It is a different beast for anybody who hasn't attempted it, and not my cup of tea. So, food always played a role for me. And obviously, naturally, just with wild game. And I'll eat anything. So, I remember being a young kid, and we convinced my father to let us shoot a porcupine that our dog had treed. And after me and my brother begging him for a while, he let us do it. And his stipulation was that me and my brother ate it, and we did. And so point being, there's always been these weird kind of things. I remember fast forward that story forward, and my brother, has a son, and He's got this groundhog that's wreaking havoc in his yard, and he's like, yeah, like, what do you think? I'm gonna shoot it. And Jack, his son, is like, I really wants me to shoot it, and he's a young kid. And I was like, dude, you got to start him out right. You got to tell him that if you're gonna kill something, you're gonna eat it. So point being, if you kill it, you got to eat it. And so they did. And it was just a really funny thing to see happen. So
what did you think of groundhog?
What's that?
What did he think of the groundhog?
He liked it.
Yeah?
According to my brother, he liked it. He kept going back for more. They refrigerated it. He reheated it, ate it for leftovers.
That's awesome.
Good for him. I mean, I don't remember how my brother cooked it. I remember him calling me and asking me. But I worked for years. I worked in the nightclub business before I did this. So I did 7 years in the nightclub business in Boston, and I worked for a guy that owned half the North End, which is the Italian district of Boston. And so he owned a lot of really big restaurants, including a restaurant called Brico, which is has won best Italian restaurant in the world more than once. So all of his chefs were from Italy. And so I got to see these people all the time, and these guys loved wild game. So, we would be, forgive me for anybody who works there still and listens to this podcast, and the location in which we did this is no longer open, so no health codes have been violated at any open establishments. But we would sneak deer in through the back door into the basement and do things like make prosciutto out of it, and just like do these wild things. I'd give these, and they were the first ones that taught me how to dry age meat. And so I had started dry aging my deer, which is just like a next level once you start doing that. So, if I've learned one thing over the years is handling meat when it comes to wild game, everything starts there. Yeah. Like, it's just like, if you mess that part up, you get it wet, you don't cool it off right. There's so many things that like, you stacked yourself against you if you haven't done it right. So learning that process is important. And over the years, I've kind of learned to master those things. And, upland is a different beast because, you're not filling your freezer with enough grouse and woodcock to eat for the year. I mean, it would be profoundly unethical. The birds we hunt are all species of conservation concerns. So, it's a little bit of a different beast when you come away from big game. But I like to call it the tapas of hunting, because you can cook these very unique small meals, that have these unique flavors that so I think in a way similar to how I talked about coming from deer hunting to bird hunting over a dog, it's just like more intimate experience now, to just create kind of these more intricate meals that are more meaningful than rather practical, I guess. Is the reality of it. So yeah, I like to think of it as the tapas of hunting. I mean, you got dozens of different wild upland game birds. Now you start thinking about ducks. I mean, there's some tasty ducks out there. I mean, the spread's pretty big. So point being, it's a pretty incredible culinary experience for anybody that really appreciates diversity, as far as no two birds are alike. They really range in difference, and like anything, it can be local too, what they're eating. It's a lot of different kind of things. So
I think I'd rather have like 25 different things in my freezer, different animals, than one big elk. Not to say I wouldn't want a big elk in my freezer, but if I had to choose, I think I might actually choose...
The big elk makes it easier.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah. I love the variety and the trying new things and experimenting with them. It's a lot of fun having a bunch of little birds in the freezer.
Totally.
Speaking of the freezer, this is a question we like to ask. What's in your fridge or freezer that you're looking forward to cooking next?
Oh man, I've held on to a few grouse, and I pluck them all, so they're all whole. But I will wait for fiddlehead season to come in and cook them up with some bear fat and fiddleheads, and that's about as native New England as you can get, and pre-European native, really. So that's probably be the next time I kind of really bust out, something. I will shoot bears occasionally. It's been a while. I'll probably shoot one this coming year for sure. But I'll trade some grouse and woodcock for meat when I can, and then I'll always volunteer to get moose out of the woods to make sure I get some moose meat. And, bear meat is luckily very underappreciated, so it's pretty easy to get bear meat off people, and especially bear fat. I don't think many Northeast folks really understand the value of bear fat. For the most part, I find myself a beggar for big game, but it works out a lot for me. So.
I have a diminishing pot of bear fat in the fridge right now that I'm just seeing slowly go away, and I'm anxious about getting it refilled this year. So hopefully I can. It's pretty solid gold, that stuff.
It is.
I've been holding on to. I've got those plastic takeout. You get the tall boys like you drink out of at the kitchen, but the little small dishes. I've got one of those that has like a quarter of it is filled with bear fat, and I've been holding on to it for 3 months. I was like, I can't.
Hey, it's gold, man. It's gold.
I don't know what I'm going to use this for, but I'm going to use it for something that's amazing.
Yeah,
dude, just baking something like cornbread out of it is actually pretty epic. Like their pastry cooking with bear fat is questionably one of the most underrated things ever.
Definitely.
So
yeah,
I was just thinking about that. Adam and I were talking about pig camp, and we were talking yesterday about breakfast stuff. And I've been working on kind of a Native American inspired like concept for coffee company or a coffee shop. And so I was testing a bunch of pastry recipes, and one of which I came up with was like pecan, sweet potato, maple scones. And I was like, man, you could easily, and they're all like, I wrote them as they're dairy free. So I was like, I could easily substitute bear fat in for that in the scone, and it would be phenomenal.
Next level.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So that may happen soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, maple's another kind of, wonderful kind of wild indigenous food too. I mean, maple on like maple glazing grouse, woodcock, anything like that. Really, really wonderful to cook with. I love doing like a sweet and sour Brussels sprouts. So you do maple syrup and then some kind of hot sauce together. You could do it with all different types of food, but just get those two, that fusion of the sweet versus that hot. And it's a cool kind of meeting of the mind. At Brico, they used to make it. I don't know if they still make it. They used to do this octopus that was with jalapeno and ginger. It was like crusted in it. So good, dude. Just like next level. It's and I used to make that at home. Like I learned how to make it. I was like, I'm gonna make this at home. But there's some really cool kind of fusions like that you can start getting into that are just wild.
I've been on a big octopus kick lately. Down in the Keys, when I was down there, we had a place that made just like this phenomenal octopus. And then I've been on a mission to like try places to see if any place is better or worse. And as a result, and then I've been cooking a lot myself. Like I'll go get it from the store, I'll sous vide it, I'll like braise it, and then I'll grill it or char it or sear it, and just like talk about underappreciated foods. I think
incredibly underappreciated.
Yeah. It's just so good. And I think people are turned off of it because it's so tough, and like it takes an extra step in order to get it where you want it to cook it. But I'm excited for the chance to like go catch some when I go to Hawaii.
Yeah. And
just have it more fresh.
Totally.
You gotta bite its head when you pull it up. Is that the way to do it?
It's funny. I was showing my daughter that video of Justin Lee, one of my friends that lives out there, and big time spear fisherman. He was like going down, and I was like, that they bite the eyes in order to kill it. Like they shake it, get it out of the way, and then you bite the eyes while you're underwater or when you get up to the top or whatever. She's like, no way. And so I pulled her up the video and showed her, and she's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, don't worry, we're going to do that, you and me. She's like, I don't know about that.
My partner's, her father's Italian immigrant, so her grandfather still does it. So in Italy, where they live, dives down in his wooden rowboat and gets octopus like that. It's so wild.
That's awesome.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse April 3rd, only on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about Project Upland a bit, and then sort of like the effect of wild food on the future of hunting, I guess, is kind of like the general where we'll wrap it. But how did you get the notion and sort of begin Project Upland, and then how's it going?
So the incredibly candid answer is that Project Upland came out of a series of excuses for me to try to find more time to go hunting. And then it spiraled into something much bigger than I ever thought about or imagined. And now we're a print publication. We've been in print for over 6 years now. We've been a brand for going on 12 years. Obviously we make films, podcasts, our website. We're the most highest SEO traction website in the world for upland hunting.
Oh.
I never thought it would be that. I think the moment in time was similar to what I alluded to earlier, kind of my stage as a hunter. I had already done the kind of method stage. I had already done the, kind of kill as many things as you could stage. I did the trophy stage. And then I found myself in the sportsman stage coming back to grouse hunting and getting a bird dog. I always wanted to get my own bird dog. When I grew up as a little kid, I would like have these hunting magazines that my father would have, and my parents were divorced, so only see my father on the weekends. But I remember sitting under the bed sheets with a flashlight, just like in the movies, and I was convinced I was going to have a German short-hair pointer, just because that's everything was marketed. I think everybody kind of my age fell to that trap. Although I didn't get one, I ended up with a wire-hair pointing Griffon, but. But point being, that's kind of how it came to be. And then and it was really about, when I worked in the nightclub business, we did a lot of film stuff for marketing. So the organization that I worked for, we were one of the first companies in the United States to start bringing electronic dance music to the United States from Europe. And so we had some of the biggest artists today play in venues that you could only fit 150 people in. Like we're talking people like Avicii, Tiesto, stuff like that. So we used a lot of film to promote this and try to get people interested in this and really try to blow up this music scene. And we hired this very talented dude, James Winterhalter, and I was just always into photography. I'm old enough that when I was in high school, it was all film still. We didn't have digital cameras, so I know how to work on a digital. I didn't know how to work on digital. Not that it was a big leap. It's a much easier entry point. But so digital fascinated me, and we had that. And I would always bother James and be like, "Hey, how'd you do this?" And eventually got a camera again and started recording. Bird hunting, because that's what I was going around doing, and just started kind of shooting these short films for the hell of it. And somebody from the Rough Grouse Society had reached out to me, and they were like, "Oh, these films you're doing are pretty cool. Like, would you mind if we use them to promote Rough Grouse Society?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. Cool." And that was just kind of how Project Upland came to be. James Winterhalter is now like a famous music video producer, and like he does all the Skrillex music videos and stuff, and so it's pretty wild. He's a much more talented filmmaker than I'll ever be. So in fact, we're not even on the same plane of existence. But so that's kind of really how like the skills came to be, and I've learned everything. So I built our website. I shot all our first films. Hopefully, you didn't read stuff I wrote in the early years before I had an editor. All of that stuff was my work, the photography and everything else. And eventually it made sense that I realized it was, I think a lot of people around me realized it sooner, that it was bigger than what I realized, and it had legs. And then I started thinking about articulating what those legs meant, and even to give it such a level of unpurposefulness. The name Project Upland was just, I called it Project Upland as a working thing, working on Project Upland, because I didn't know what else to call it. I couldn't think of a good name, and just, I never thought of a better name. And we just kept calling it Project Upland, and now the universe has Project Upland. And it wasn't it wasn't some grand scheme. It wasn't some I'm out to do this thing. I just wanted to hunt more. It just happened to be with bird dogs at that moment. I just happened to pick up some skill sets because of life and applied them here. The winds were blowing in the right direction. I happened to catch a wave accidentally. I mean, it's really, and then at one point, people smarter than me started to articulate it into a business. So
it's awesome. I see a lot of parallels, sort of the way that we've done things too, and the way that you've done things, and I appreciate that a lot. It brings a very authentic approach to the whole thing, which is good.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be, in this day and age, something that's unique about our brand is that I have, some would say, a poor reputation. I think it's a good reputation for not being friendly to advertisers or sponsors. And I still live paycheck to paycheck. I have my whole life. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It's in my DNA. Still do today, and that's fine. Project Upland's a stable company. Nobody's getting rich, though. And part of that is because I intentionally turned those things away, because I never wanted Project Upland to turn into an advertorial. I didn't want to turn it into an echo chamber. I didn't want to be restrained. And that's held true today. We left a lot of money on the table. And if I was a different person, I probably could have blew up Project Upland to be something bigger, brought investors in, had my payday, and walked away. But I look at it as much as I do the Urban Deer Complex. It's if it's anything, it's a cult classic. And people will probably still talk about it when I'm dead and find it and cherish it. And that's all I want for Project Upland. I want people to, I hope it inspires people to do other things, do better things, do bigger things. Because the people that I think about before me do that for me. I think about William Hardin Foster, who wrote New England Grouse Shooting, or George Bird Evans, who wrote, God knows, dozens of books, these grouse hunters and stuff, and Burton Spiller, stuff like that. And they inspire me, and they take me on adventures, even though they've been dead for a very long time. And I just hope that our work does that. And I hope people carry that on after. And I hope people 100 years from now are somehow reading a story, or maybe Project Upland's still putting things out. And, a big thing too is we've done a lot to preserve those people before us. So we're turning a lot of those books into audio format, something that to kind of introduce a new generation of hunters to them. Because I look at it as this brand is built on their backs, and we owe it to them to make sure that their place was solidified and told, and they're the ones that paved the way. And I was lucky enough to feed off it. There's not many original things to say about bird hunting in the 21st century. But there's a lot of wild science and history that could just make you lose your mind in a fun way. And that's what we do. We want people to have fun, be inspired, do those things, and maybe put a little bit of a different spin on it, but I wouldn't say it's some original concept. But that integrity of the brand has always been important to me. My business partner, Jennifer Wipinski, who's been my partner now with Project Upland for a few years, shares that vision, that the ethics of the brand, the importance of the birds, supersedes the fiscal benefits of being business owners. It's incredibly socialist of me. I understand that, but it's just who I am.
it really comes across in the magazine. I've been a subscriber on and off. I tend to rotate my subscriptions around, but it does really come across in the magazine, and I appreciate it as a reader. I like that kind of punk attitude towards the accumulation of wealth in these systems that we have. Like, it's nice to make a buck off it so you can continue doing it, but you don't need to get rich. this kind of lifestyle isn't about being rich, I don't think. And that your publication kind of screams that a little bit. And I love it. While still,
that's what we're going for. I read a lot of Thrasher growing up, and had a foot-long mohawk and was a punk rock kid, and had a lot of zines. So like when Project Upland became print, it was kind of a funny story, because we had somebody consult who was there for the launching of some really big publications today, and they were like so against everything Project Upland was, and they were like, well, you couldn't, if you're going to do this, you need to raise $1 million, and you need to call it something different. And I remember like my first thought was like, if I had $1 million, why in the world would I be doing this? And that was like my first thought. And then my second thought was like, wouldn't call it Project Upland. That's the whole point. The whole point is we're different than everybody else. And so we didn't raise $1 million. We went out and started a print publication, and I would say for probably the first 5 years of print, we quite literally went print bill to print bill, never quite knowing how we were going to pay that bill, and it somehow worked out. And there were scary moments, but I would just go grouse hunt and not think about it. And somehow we survived, and now it's a very stable company. And we concern ourselves more with giving. And our commodity is media. It's influence. It's that kind of stuff. So the things we think about hard are really how do we fit into teaching a new generation about ethics. And frankly, one of my biggest concerns is I am not very pleased with hunting media as a whole, willingness to stick their head in the sands when everything is not going well. And that for me is not something, we've been canceled more than once. And every time I'm just like, whatever. Like, it's just like, you're not gonna, I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to live off food stamps. I know what it's like to eat woodcock for 2 months straight. Like, it's just not, you can't hurt me. And the truth is too important. It's more important than me. So, I don't know. Maybe that's my form of neurodivergence.
No, I think you're 100%. Like, we've had a lot of discussions on it too. And I think, you see it evident, like, both Adam and I's exodus from a lot of mainstream social media, we're shifting a lot of what we do both into audio format and then to actual like print books. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just that, and there's a lot going on in the space that I don't know that I agree with, and it's just, I don't know. It's leaving a bad taste. And then, as you mentioned, like, younger folks are coming into this, or even new hunters are coming into this, and they're seeing it and they're like, what is this? And they're either completely distasted by it, or they're like bought into like, oh, this is the way it is. And then there's like a group of folks that are like, no, this is not the way it is. This is not how we should be representing hunting and fishing. Like, no way.
Unfortunately, the loudest voices in the room are often the ones that get attention, and they're often the people that shouldn't be representing us. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that a lot of good people do this. They go in kind of different directions and don't want to, and it's kind of a weird thing, hell, I mean, I get offered to go on podcasts all the time, and I accept very few invitations. I do some heavily vetting before I do now, because I don't trust people, and I don't think people are portraying things, and I certainly do not want my image or Project Upland's image caught up in the wrong things, because I do think we do serve as a touchstone that is very different than the rest of the hunting space, and I am very adamant about protecting that continent for as long as we can. So, I mean, I've been offered to go on many television shows and stuff, and I just won't do it. It's just not. And that's, the tagline of Project Upland since day one was, "These are your stories," fundamentally because I really don't want the spotlight. Like, it's always been about other people. Like, if I am one thing, I'm a storyteller. Good or bad, I am a storyteller. I want to tell stories, often not my own. And that has always been the interest. And as you guys know, you go out into the hunting space and it's AJ hunts the world 50 different ways instead of going to those experts in those places. And it's like, how many television shows are there, like, really dyed-in-the-wool hunters that are setting those stands for deer and everything else, and then they call some celebrity up to sit in that stand and kill that deer?
Yeah.
Like, that's BS, man. Like, that is not, like, I want to know about that dude that actually patterned that deer, that did the hard work, that, like, that's the, and those people are not the loud people. And, influencing, all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, Project Upland has made some poor choices over the years and got ourselves, like, I am incredibly naive in believing people's intentions. And we've seen it firsthand in our own brand. And it's sad. And especially, again, I think that layer of being in the bird hunting space. Birds aren't doing so good. And it's not going to get better. I saw a hot take recently from somebody who has a really big podcast about, repealing the Endangered Species Act. And it's like, all game species are doing good. It's like, have you ever heard of a ruffed grouse? Have you ever heard of a sage grouse? Have you ever heard of a bobwhite quail? Like, game animals aren't doing good, bro. In fact, they're doing really bad. And when you want to talk about fail-safes, Endangered Species Act is already the fail-safe for some of those game birds, like the lesser prairie chicken or the Gunnisons. Like, there's extinct game birds already. Like, it's really wild to me, that kind of disconnection. So
that's crazy. Well, we appreciate you deciding to join us on our podcast. That was nice of you then.
Yeah, I saw you guys did that thing with Howell about hounds, and it was pretty balanced, and I appreciated that. And I'm all about I think the PR take about is just people need to talk more about how tasty mountain lions actually are. Exactly. So because you need to normalize that stuff, and even when it comes to dogs, coyotes. Personally, I can't shoot a coyote at this point in my life. I just love dogs too much. But even that, I mean, plenty of people eat dogs in plenty of countries. I've eaten coyote before. It's not bad. It's a pretty. There are questionably more disgusting things that we eat. So I think, that kind of normalizing that will go a long way to help in certain places, but I just don't see that gaining, like mountain lion is an obvious one. I think it's just one of those things that's just like really kind of quiet, but obviously people aren't eating coyotes. Let's be real. Very few people are attempting that.
Yeah.
It did take a lot of understanding of cooking to make that reality.
Yeah, it's man, I could go down a rabbit hole. It's just the more I see like the coyote hunting tournaments and all the things of like shoot them and stack them and like all, and I'm just like, come on.
We have, if there is one thing that I hold evident in the year 2025, is that our culture is very astray, and we need to come back to Aldo Leopold and away from Ted Nugent. And until we do that, I mean, first time ever, popularity of the public acceptance of hunting has declined for the first time ever. And it's not because of food. That bedrock will always exist in this. Like that is a foundation stone of hunting that will always be accepted, appreciated, and all those things. It's extreme politics. And even more damning that I see is the parroting of bullet points that we say as a community that just are inherently untrue. Hunting does not pay for all of conservation. In fact, I would argue that black gun shooters pay for more for conservation than any hunter. And there's also many other sectors of non-hunting or non-gun owners that pay for a lot for conservation. And on top of that, we want to talk about how we shield ourselves with the science-based management. And if there's one thing that I've learned as a Fish and Game Commissioner, if there's one thing I've learned as a journalist, is that hunters believe in the science all the way up to the part where they could potentially lose some type of access or the science would restrict something. And then we instantly abandon the science and we go to pseudoscience. And that is it's already coming home to roost. It destroys our credibility. So when you have a fight like mountain lions in Colorado, you're coming at that fight because you're already discredited as a community. because you have actively denied science in other places. So point being, and I'll say the obvious one, and this pisses a lot of people off. Lead is toxic. You shoot lead, and it gets in everything. Yeah. And people want to say lead happens naturally. Yeah, it does in places, and those places are dead where they happen. And we mine it out, and we use it. And what angers me is I think about, recent research around woodcock absorbing lead from earthworms, and we can isolate the fact that it's man-introduced lead. It's shooting grounds. They can isolate the isotopes or something to identify the fact that it's man-altered. And these woodcock have lead so high in their blood that it would be lethal to waterfowl. And they're surviving, and they're living, but it's actually toxic for you as a human to eat it. And we still sit here and we deny it. And sure, it sucks, but what's going to happen is we're going to end up with an all-out ban at some point. It's inevitable. What we could have done is been the responsible community. We could have been Aldo Leopold, and we could have said, hey, this thing is kind of actually not what we should be doing. We could have promoted doing things differently in our community. We could have thought about things like people concerned about their vintage shotguns. Okay, well, what can we do? Europeans are using zinc shot, which is as cheap as steel. If you don't want to pay for bismuth, I'm sorry. If you're shooting a Fox A grade, you can afford bismuth shot anyways. There's these different aspects that we as a community could have embraced these things sooner, and we should have led the charge on it. Instead, we've walked in the room and we denied the science because it didn't agree with our overall narrative. And that to me is why we're losing. That's why we'll lose hunting, is because we want to shield ourselves with science only to then deny science. And that happens. It happens with the predator discussion. It happens with deer management. Whitetail deer are overpopulated. Intentionally overpopulating whitetails so you can shoot big bucks is not conservation. There are some hard truths in the room. And hunters are just covering their ears and acting like it's not happening. And they just, they say fake news when these things come up. You know what's going to save us from CWD? Not hunters, wolves. I'm sorry, that's the truth. We already know it. And it's just that's just the nature of the beast. And until we as a community start walking back to that, and what I do appreciate is that I think younger generations, I mean, how could you not be? You grew up with climate change fears, and you recycle everything. Like if you don't recycle, you're going to jail type mentality. Like it's like the leave no trace crowd on crack. So I do think that younger people have this like I see a lot of new hunters that, and mind you, upland hunting can, I think, sometimes give skewed perspectives. It's a very unique thing for people to decide to their path for hunting. But I see a lot of people that, and I don't see this in older hunters, they're not just interested in, I want to shoot a bird. They're interested in, this is a lobster mushroom? Like, why is a lobster mushroom here? This is, I see so many like older generations, they're like, grouse are dying. I don't see any grouse. And it's like, yeah, dude, because like grouse exist in a cover until it's like 20, 25 years old, and then they abandon it. And like clearly nobody actually ever taught you how to find grouse habitat, and you're just hunting where your dad showed you to, and now you think grouse are extinct. And the reality is that you're just actually a really bad hunter. And I don't see that with younger hunters. Younger hunters are like, tell me, it's like, I like to call it the but why generation, but why? But why was that bird here? But why should I shoot that shot size? But why did the dog do that? But why do you think this is better than that? Like that whole curiosity that's encompassing that ecological approach where you're interested in the lobster mushroom to the, to whatever it might be on the other, the maple syrup to the grouse, to the moose, to the bear fat. Those are the types of people that we need. We just can't be, I was the headline speaker at the first R3 symposium in the United States, and I have a lot of regrets about R3. I'll say that out loud. And I think a lot of blind recruiting. And I understand where a lot of it came from. State agencies are underfunded in a lot of places, not all places, some places, depends on what state you live in. And some states struggle to even match their Pittman-Robertson money, which is, for those who don't know, is taxes on guns and ammunition, which then a state fish and game agency comes up with $1. The feds send you $3 from those taxes, and you do state management for fish and game. That's how the system works. Well, some states have trouble even coming up with that money, and that's because the black gun industry is creating the biggest surplus in conservation funding we've ever seen. And so point being, now these agencies struggle to match these dollars. Well, the only option they have to match dollars is sell more hunting licenses. How do you sell more hunting licenses? You recruit more hunters. And I understand, I mean, it's a pretty basic math problem, but at what cost? And sometimes I think what happens is that new hunters get a bad rap for old hunters. Not old hunters, I don't mean by age. New hunters, as in first generation hunters, get the bad rap for people who grew up hunting who have participated in recruiting hunters. So point being, people spent money in this space to hire influencers or promoters to recruit people who did some really bad things. Questionable things, where it's at what expense? And I mean, you don't have to look far to see where it's gone wrong. And that kind of blind recruiting without purpose, without purposeful things. I think of, giving deer meat out at, some kind of local, fair, and recruiting homesteaders to learn how to hunting. That's a great R3 program. You're getting the right people. Yeah. But somebody whacking and stacking them and high-fiving or reaping a bird or saying, kill them all or whatever else, that person being funded by R3 money to recruit people, that's where we messed up. And what's sad, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, is, the modernization of the Pittman-Robertson Act allowed us to, the Pittman-Robertson Act actually is part of the New Deal. So Franklin Roosevelt signed it into law. Senator Key Pittman, who was a Democrat, and Congressman Robinson, also a Democrat. It's like the most socialized policy ever. I mean, it's so that is how all of state funding habitat, not actually doesn't go towards law enforcement, but creating habitat, scientific research, all the state level stuff, all that money comes from there. Well, we modernized it once. And when we did that, we allowed some of that money to start to be used for R3. So that money's not creating habitat, which, I mean, at this point, I now have a gripe with. And I will say that I was part of it. I was part of it. But I always looked at it, and this is, my kind of naivety. I never took money for it. I spoke at the R3 Symposium for free. I went and put out a publication called Hunt Rising, which, we still do the research for today. We conduct a massive research called the North American Upland Hunting Survey that's been going on for 7 years now. And we were the first stable data set for millennials. So we had enough millennials answer the question to tell you what millennial hunters might have had opinions about. And that's why I ended up as a guest speaker at this R3 Symposium. And we still do it, but we never took a dime for it. Never, to this day. Gave it away for free. Send it to all 50 states, send it to the federal government, send it to every nonprofit. Here you go. Here's what we learned. Let us know if you need to learn something new. We'll put a question in there for you. And the problem is it turned into monetization. It became a new tool for people to make money, and that's what people do. We're Americans. We're capitalists. I mean, fundamentally, I get it. I see it. I mean, I understand it, but that's great if you sell cars or if you're in construction. It's not great when it comes to birds that are are considered species of conservation concern. Yeah. It's not cool anymore. Capitalism isn't cool there.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
Hear that? It's SpringFest savings calling your name, only at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a Select Ego trimmer, blower, or mower. Plus, get your choice of any 2 bags of Miracle-Gro organic soil mix for only $16. Shop these can't-miss deals in-store or online today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Excludes Hawaii.
So we're taking all that in. What do you think sort of the world of wild food, is it going to help with recruitment? Is it going to fizzle? Like, I think a lot about wild food has the potential to help with a lot of other issues that we have, and it's not going to be the solver of food insecurity, but I think people learning how, your example of like the homesteaders, like branching out and learning about, hunting deer and harvesting deer and sort of like making themselves more self-sufficient, and I see a lot more people doing that. What's your take on that perspective?
Well, I think food, I said it earlier, it's a bedrock, it's a foundation stone. And it's immovable. I don't think you could remove food from hunting if you wanted to.
No.
And so I think it could be a great tool and really kind of grassroots stuff. Again, the classic, giving venison out at the game fair or whatever. There's some great moments, and obviously public perception is the biggest thing. But our future rights of hunting is going to be lost in politics and science, in the politics of science. It's not going to be lost on food. Food is what has saved it for a long time. It's going to be a cornerstone. If we can turn the narrative around, it's going to continue to be the bedrock. It's going to be an undeniable truth. It is a respectable truth. It's an agreeable truth, as we know. The highest approval for hunting is food related. So if people are doing it for food, absolutely, But I don't. It's an interesting thing. Project Upland's an interesting thing. We weren't food centric until about 4 years ago that we really started drilling in food. And I got away with murder not having it for a long time. And really, I just didn't have necessarily kind of the chefs or the people that I thought were capable. We dabbled in it with people like Hank Shar and stuff early on, and for what we could afford to do with him and whatnot. But and then we became more purposeful with it. But this is the thing: if you come in and you're a bird hunter, I don't care what your touch point is, whether it's a nonprofit or Project Upland. That birds are having a bad time, and it's on everybody's minds, everybody's conversations. It's in your face on social media every day. Every nonprofit's spewing it. It's true. It's facts. When you learn about habitat, you start to learn about why these things are there. All specialists. They're highly specialist creatures. So I think in my space, you inherently are going to make these really conscious, science-centric hunters that are going to have very conscionable ecological beliefs, because it is an undeniable truth in their pursuit. And again, that's the question. The question's going to come down to public perception. We're in a time of extreme politics. And so point being, I think it's pretty easy to argue that the decline in hunting right now, if we were going to put a bow on it, the public perception of hunting is its association with extreme politics. And I think the irony of that, and I'm gonna say this with some caveats. The Republican Party has done a lot of good things for conservation over the years. But this concept that the Republican Party is the party of conservation is not true. It's fake. It always was fake. Teddy Roosevelt, that everybody want to claim, got thrown out of his own party for being a radical environmentalist and because he proposed national health care. He's not a Republican. He radically protected land that destroyed industries overnight to the point where he was hated and thrown out of his party. And there are some good Republicans over the years that have done it. But the foundation stones that we know for hunting, so Pittman-Robinson Act, the Duck Stamp Act, the Sports Fish Restoration Act, are all liberal policies. And most of them were signed during the New Deal. And so it's built fundamentally on a socialized system, a liberal system, that insulates it from capitalism. And the truth is that even Democrats in 2025 forget that they're the party of conservation, because we have now told this narrative long enough that nobody even remembers the truth. And there was a reason for it. It was a very honest reason, which is when you try to pass a modern bill to get conservation work done, you need to have some people cross party lines to vote. So for a long time, conservation was bipartisan. I say that with quotation marks in the air for people that don't want to see it, because a few Republicans would cross the party lines and vote. But almost always, every Democrat voted in favor, even when those bills lost. And so point being, you even look at the Great American Outdoor Act, which I would argue is not necessarily a conservation bill. It was more about funding public parks. There was 108 no votes on him. 107 of them were Republicans, and one of them was an independent. There is one party that has always consistently been the party of conservation. And we have told a story so deep, and we have lied to ourselves so much just so we could get those few votes to cross the aisle, because then what do? That one senator crosses the aisle, like Senator Daines, the notorious. He crosses the aisle, signs it, and now he gets the victory lap about how Senator Daines is the senator of conservation, even though every liberal senator voted in favor of that bill. And we've created this really weird situation because now we've broken our political system, and it's incredibly partisan. So what happened? Well, all that work that you did to give a very specific narrative so that you could get those few votes doesn't matter anymore. And now also everybody thinks that you're the enemy of hunting. And don't get me wrong, the party losing its way, which I think it has, the Democrats, now it is a stronghold for, anti-hunting movements. And that's because they don't remember that they're the party of hunting. And we did that accidentally. And it's just kind of funny. And again, I'm very, ironically, I'm pretty middle of the road. I'm not, I didn't get elected vice chair, even though I'm the only sitting Democrat on New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission. I didn't get elected vice chair because I'm unagreeable or too extreme. It's quite the opposite. I believe that things can still be bipartisan, and I hope they can be. But this is the truth. And this truth, and still we come back to it, and we understand that these truths, I'm all about it. If the Republican Party wants to claim to be the party of conservation, okay. But vote that way. Because then we would have the Recovering America's Wildlife Act would have been passed, and we wouldn't be in budget shortfalls in states. We wouldn't be defunding public lands right now. We wouldn't be opening them up for mining, which we don't get royalties off of. We wouldn't be doing all these things if the Republican Party was the party of conservation. And that's the truth. And ironically, it is, if you go back to Teddy Roosevelt. Absolutely is. Dude was a radical. He was an activist. I mean, the dude created 51 bird refuges overnight, signed 51 executive orders, create 51 bird sanctuaries that literally ended market hunting overnight with an executive order, which was considered the most controversial use of executive orders of his time. And that's radicalism, dude. That's liberal radicalism. So it's pretty wild. That's the National Wildlife Refuge System. That's how we got it. And it ended our market hunting overnight. Nobody could go and rob nests for eggs or feathers or club birds or anything. Overnight, ended the industry. Overnight. And he got thrown out of his party. And so we can all be there again. And quite frankly, I hate that I have to say that it's one side or the other, because I don't think I fit on either side. So I'm coming here saying that we just need to start looking at the truth, which the truth is that you always have to follow the science, even when it might restrict things. And this whole, if you give them an inch, they take a yard, is bullshit. It's not true. I work in it. I serve as a fish and game commissioner. I'll tell you, there's Republicans coming from your hunting rights, and there's Democrats coming for your hunting rights. That's the truth. And if I'm going to put a little prettier of a bow on it, and this is a highly unpopular thing to say, but I'll say it anyways, this is a class war. This isn't about left or right. This is about poor people having access to things, and I say poor people, working class, middle class, having access to something that as Americans, we actually decided to intentionally protect from capitalism. We made it a highly socialized system. We intentionally made it into what it is for a very good reason. And it's so that you and I, or anybody else listening to this, can go out and I can walk out onto the prairie and look in every direction and not see a person over my hunting dog and shoot a sharp-tailed grouse. Or I can go to northern New Hampshire in the middle of nowhere and not hear a single man-made sound and shoot a ruffed grouse and hear that shot echo through the woods. And I can do that as an American who can barely pay his bills every month. And that right there, that's what we're fighting for. And when we see the things that are coming for us right now, it's not about you and I. It's not about people like me. It's about people who have money, who are going to be able to do this even when their public lands are taken away. Because, dude, they don't hunt on public land. Why would you hunt on public land when you own, 20,000 acres in Montana? Like, come on. Of course your property is better managed than the federal property. But, dude, I'd rather hunt my subpar managed land because I can hunt it, that's owned by the public, than not be able to hunt at all. And sure, the system ain't perfect. Bureaucracy's messed up a lot of things. I love cutting trees, and bureaucracy certainly messed that up for grouse hunters. But I'm telling you, what we think this is and what this is are two very different things, and we need to start seeing the light. And we need to come back to Aldo Leopold. It needs to be a lesson here. And I hope that Project Upland continues to slowly and steadily be the voice of reason in the room for a media company when we tell these stories. But and hey, if you don't want to put any of this in the podcast, I totally get it. Some people are a little more tolerant to my rhetoric than others, but
no, I like it. It's going in there. That's the great thing about having our own shows. We can talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about.
Well, I respect you more for that, and I commend you for it too, because you know what? We need more of this.
Yeah.
Need more willingness to accept hard truths and move on from there. And it's okay. Like, it's gonna, like, this is the thing, like, I think about the rulemaking process of New Hampshire Fish and Game. We're going through a rulemaking process right now. And I've put a lot of time into reaching across the aisle with anti-hunting groups. And I say that again with quotation marks in the air. There's some things that, very hyper-focused that they want to get rid of. Like trapping. I think we should be trapping. I don't think we should get rid of trapping. I'm a fierce defender of dogs, and they certainly come for hounds. But I spend the time to talk to those people. I go out of my way to talk to them. And I go out of my way to be empathetical towards those people, to understand that they hear them. And we just introduced our initial rulemaking process. And every time I've been a Fish and Game Commissioner, at the end of that meeting, the public can come up and speak. And every year, the anti-hunting groups come up and bellow off all the bad things we did. This year, for the first time, not one of them got up and said anything. And I'm pretty proud of that, because you know what?
That's awesome.
Progress can be made. There can be agreements. And like, that's the thing. Like, this whole zero-sum game, only a one winner, that type of stuff's got to end. Like, this is a compromise. Management is a compromise. Conservation is it's a compromise. I mean, wildlife laws and rules, the science can show us facts, but it can't tell us what to do. And you do have to factor in the public when you make that decision. So, point being, like, if you're going to be, like, this is it, like, if you're going to be put on the spotlight, like, just behave accordingly. Mm-hmm. Like, and then it's going to be fine. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, but we have been quick to pearl clutch, be scared. And I get it. I understand it. I mean, you don't want to lose these things. I'm afraid of losing the ability to use e-collars. Europe's already done it. That keeps me up at night. So, there's things that are real, and they're real to be fearful. But I assure people from firsthand experience that being a diplomat, reaching across the aisle, working towards a better resolution, agreeing when things are in fact the science doesn't necessarily favor you agreeing with you, that simple agreement goes a long way to our credibility as what we should be, stewards, right? We should be the people sounding the alarms. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be the people, again, pearl clutching. We should be sounding the alarms. We should be coming up and saying, hey, time to ban lead. That should be us. And we should control that narrative, because you know what? There are real economic implications of something like that, right? That's scary. I mean, I couldn't afford bismuth if, companies didn't send me bismuth, so that's scary. But I have no problem shooting steel. I mean, I'm all about, cheap number 7 steel will take a grouse woodcock out of the sky any day of the week. So, and I don't shoot a vintage shotgun. So, I mean, there's a little bit of naivety there, I guess. But anyways, point being, we need to work to resolve and understand that these things are complex, and we need to do it as a team. Again, this them versus us, and this kind of, I remember the first hearing I went to for rulemaking when I became commissioner, which is going on almost 5 years ago now. And these groups, I was warned, these anti-hunting groups are going to come up and talk. And the first group that came up that they said were anti-hunters started talking about how we need to kill more white-tailed deer. And I'm like, wait a minute, didn't you, I remember looking at the guy next to me and be like, didn't you say these guys were anti-hunting? And they're talking about how we need to kill more white-tailed deer? Mm-hmm. What? Well, yeah, because they want to close down coyote season for part of the year. Yeah, because they want the coyotes to eat the deer, which are overpopulated. Of course they do. How is that anti-hunting, man? I'm sorry. They're saying quite the opposite. So point being, we need to recalibrate here a bit. And I hope folks like yourself that, you guys do a great job. And you,
thank you. And
you cover those things and give people the education to understand that, this is, and food, I've in a way, I think I've dismissed food as a thing, but I want to reiterate, it is the foundation stone of this. If you don't eat it, you have nothing to stand on. You have no moral high ground whatsoever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so point being, I like to reiterate that, but as we know, public perception just, the trophy hunting really isn't real. It's sure, I've shooting trophy whitetails, but all of them got eaten, mm-hmm. So point being, that's just a little bit of a public perception issue. Sure. But it's there, and that's a marketing problem. That's not, another thing, but that foundation. And I do think the rise of kind of the food-centric culture in hunting, which obviously you guys have been a part of, you see it firsthand. I think that goes a long way to show the public that's true, in a different way. It's kind of that Anthony Bourdain of it, it's showing that there's this really cool kind of, this is the only way you could experience that, tapas of hunting, that this is the only way you'll ever eat a sharp-tailed grouse, which is red meat, mm-hmm. This is the only way you'll ever eat a woodcock, although I guess if you travel to Europe, you could totally buy a woodcock at a restaurant, a Eurasian woodcock, but
there's still so much. I mean, man, we talk about that so frequently as far as as hunters, you've got the ability, everything's at your hands. You just have to go out and find it. Whereas I think about this too, and people that don't eat certain types of food and, maybe not allergy based, it's just a choice. And I'm like, yep. I could never do that because I would mentally just explode, because I would restrict myself from eating something that may be the best thing I've ever had in my life. Mm-hmm. And I think hunting, fishing, foraging, it all taps into that, because you get into a space where you get a little bit uncomfortable. Just it's that Anthony Bourdainism, right? You get into a space where everything's a little uncomfortable and it's new, and then you find your spot and you find your place, and then it becomes comfortable, and then it becomes normal, and then you're like, hey man, come over here, let me show you this, and you show someone else how to do it and bring them into that space, and that's that growth factor, I think, that's positive.
And we're seeing people walking across the aisle from veganism into wild food, and we're seeing new people approaching hunting that never were the traditional enemies in quotes of hunting. So I think seeing it from the food aspect and from the, like you said, the but why crowd, which are much more like Aldo Leopold than a lot of the old school hunters, I would say, who are like, I don't eat that shit, I don't forage, I don't do anything, it's just only deer, whatever. I see some hope with that new crowd that's approaching it through the lens of food and through the lens of like a varied approach, like a holistic approach to everything in the woods, not just deer hunting or this hunting or that hunting, but like kind of wanting to experience all of it, wanting to question all of it and feel and smell all of it. Like that's a new type of hunter, or a new old type of hunter maybe. But I see some hope for the future of it through those kind of people kind of infiltrating the system, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
I think the long game is that will, I think it's grown. I've been working in this injury per se for, a decade almost now, actively, and I've seen it grow. The demographics have really shifted. It's definitely a lot more. I remember being a kid and I didn't meet anybody who was the first person in their family to hunt. And now it's like, I feel like every 10 hunters I meet, like 6 of them are first generation hunters, which is incredible. I mean, it's a pretty incredible thing. And again, I think there's the bad things that have happened with R3 are more about the established hunters that abuse the system rather than a lot of the people that did get recruited. And I think a lot of those recruitment efforts were happening naturally. I don't think they necessarily needed to be. Sure, you could talk about them and articulate it, but they definitely didn't need like this massive funding mechanism because, again, like wild food, for us, it wasn't food. Maybe I should have said this. It's dogs, So the amount of stories in our brand where people are like, well, I had this hunting dog breed and I decided I needed to work it a little more. And next thing you know, they end up at this dog club thing and they're never going to hunt. I mean, I can tell you stories about vegans, just like you said, it's so common. And then, then we had these birds got killed while we were training. So then I felt obligated that I had to eat them and whatever else. And the next thing you know, they're, hunting grouse and own 5 pointing dogs. That's a common story in our brand. And dogs are the vector there. It's for Upland. That's our silver bullet. It's dogs, which is super, super cool. I really love that. I mean, who doesn't love a dog? I mean, maybe some people, but I probably don't trust you if you don't. Sorry if anybody on the podcast doesn't like dogs.
All right, man. Well, where can folks go to ask questions, pick up a subscription, engage with you guys? What are the best ways in?
Sure. ProjectUpland.com. Pretty easy. You find everything there, the magazine or podcasts or articles or films, whatever you might be interested in. And, we operate on a subscription-based service, so we have some advertisers. They dwindle every year because I say things like I said today in this podcast. And we rely on our subscribers. We're a subscription-based model. So hopefully some of you will, if you're interested in it, subscribe. We always have 2 recipes in every issue of the magazine. Rossano Russo up in Canada, always Italian recipes. Totally my favorite. Why he's in there. I handpicked him. And then we have Jenny out of the Midwest. I think she's in Nebraska.
Jenny Newman.
Yeah. A lot of Asian influenced food. Love her recipes. I love Asian food. So really a lot of cool stuff. So they're regular. They contribute every issue. And we also have a lot of online content for recipes too. Some of those recipes eventually we do put up online, not all of them. Just if we need to fill an editorial online gap, they might pop in there. But thank you. Thank you for having us on here. And however Project Upland can ever help you and you guys' brands. And we're always looking for more chef writers. So we accept not just upland game, but also turkeys and waterfowl. So always feel free to think of us and submit. We're always looking for new people.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. Adam, you got a last thought?
Just, I love what you said about the but why generation and the Aldo Leopold and whatever your thoughts are on politics. If what we talked about tonight pissed you off or made you nod, it doesn't matter. I think I've seen a million things online that say every hunter needs to have Aldo Leopold on their bookshelf, and maybe everyone should just go and there it is.
There it is.
Everyone should just go and reread it and maybe recenter yourself into what the outdoors and what being an outdoors person and what hunting really should mean and means to us all, and start asking questions and become more curious again. Because Aldo Leopold was obviously a very curious person and was fought for conservation and all this stuff, and I think we can all use that as a bit of a touchstone nowadays, especially with what's happening, the chaos that's happening out there. So, yeah.
Can I actually say what his best quote is, though?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. There are two types of hunting: ordinary hunting and rough grouse hunting.
I like it. No, thanks AJ for coming on, man. Like I said at the first, we've been dancing circles around each other for a while, so it's good to sit down and talk. And so much of what you said resonates. And I think this is the important thing. Like, the diplomacy piece is so key. No matter where you sit in politics, no matter where you sit, it's doing the right thing, being a good person, and just being willing to hear people out and just have a conversation. And 98% of the time you're going to find there's so much more common ground than you think there ever was. Absolutely. And I think that's the space that builds bonds. And I'll tell you, I'll bring it around to food. That's why I love food so much, is because it's that common denominator amongst everybody, and a meal and a conversation can change a relationship forever. And I think it's magical. But thanks again for coming on. Thanks everybody out there for listening. We'll include links to show notes, all that stuff online, and then be sure to go check out Project Upland, get you a subscription, follow them on social media, plug into all the awesome things they're doing, and then whatever podcast platform you're listening to, punch that 5-star button, leave us a review, tell us we're doing right, or tell us we're doing wrong. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.